Watching India Tonight with me, Sumita, Kareer, and my colleague Shibani, Garat. And tonight on the show, ladies and gentlemen, we will be putting a spotlight on U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Both of them met yesterday at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida. The meeting went for over 2 hours. In fact, these talks focused on a revised 20-point peace framework aimed at ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, both the leaders emerged optimistic, with Donald Trump describing the negotiations as them being in final stages, and in fact also stating that the sides are getting a lot closer, maybe very close to a deal. He also added that Ukraine and Russia are closer than ever to peace. He also praised President Zelensky as quote-unquote brave, and noting a productive phone call that he held with Russian President Vladimir Putin just before that meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, President Zelensky as well, he echoed a positive tone. He stated that U.S. President and, in fact, the United States and Ukraine have about 90% agreed on the 20-point peace plan and fully aligned. Both sides are fully aligned on robust security guarantees for what Ukraine described as a key milestone for lasting peace. Shibani, in fact, what we're also noticing is that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also been tweeting about all of these developments that went on yesterday at Mar-a-Lago.
Indeed, Sumita, but however, there are a lot of reservations. Despite all the sound bites, no major breakthroughs were announced, and Trump cautioned that the talks could still falter, saying in a few weeks we will know one way or another. Now, negotiators from US and Ukraine and Europe are expected to continue discussions soon, possibly in Washington, with Trump planning another call with Putin. The Florida summit came amid intensified Russian missile and drone attacks on Kyiv and other cities, underscoring the urgency as diplomacy advances. So, where are we exactly when it comes to the peace plan, and are there any realistic chances of the war ending with Russia not committing to anything? Before we go on to our guest, first, let's listen in to the reactions.
We had a terrific meeting. We discussed a lot of things. As you know, I had an excellent phone call with President Putin that lasted for over 2 hours. We discussed a lot of points, and I do think we're getting a lot closer, maybe very close. The President and I just spoke to the European leaders. They were President Emmanuel Macron of France, President Alexander Stubb of the Republic of Finland, President Karol Nawrocki of the Republic of Poland, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store of the Kingdom of Norway, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni of the Italian Republic, Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom of Britain and Northern Ireland, Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Federal Republic of Germany, Secretary General Mark Rutte, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, President Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission. We spoke to all of those great leaders. They're all great leaders. And we had a great talk with them after we were completed. We thought it was appropriate to speak with them. And our meeting was excellent. We covered, somebody would say 95%. I don't know what percent, but we have made a lot of progress on ending that war, which is really certainly the most deadly war since World War II, probably the biggest war since World War II.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank President Trump for a great meeting at this amazing place in his home in Mar-a-Lago. And we had a really great discussions on all the topics, and we appreciate the progress that was made by American and Ukrainian teams in these recent weeks. Special thanks to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and thank you for their engagement and full commitment, and also to our team, and first of all to Rustem Umerov and General Gnatov, and to all our teams. And we discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees 100% agreed. U.S., Europe, Ukraine security guarantees almost agreed. Military dimension 100% agreed. Prosperity plan being finalized, and we also discussed the sequencing of the following actions. And we agree that security guarantees is a key milestone in achieving lasting peace, and our teams will continue working on all aspects. We also had a joint productive call with European leaders, like President Trump said already, and a lot of leaders, including NATO and the EU. And we agreed that our teams will meet in upcoming weeks to finalize all discussed matters. And we agreed with President Trump that he will host us, and maybe in Washington, European leaders and Ukrainian delegation, yes, in January. And Ukraine is ready for peace. And once again, would like to thank President Trump for a warm welcome and substantial discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
So that was President Zelensky and President Trump, shaking hands. So will indeed peace prevail between Russia and Ukraine, or will Putin have the last word? To discuss this and more, we are joined in by Manoj Joshi. He's a distinguished fellow at ORF, also Indrani Talukdar fellow at Chintan Research Foundation, and Adele Nazarian, who's a geopolitical strategist. All of you, welcome to ET Now. My first question to you, in fact, Adele, we find ourselves in the end of 2025, 3 months of shuttle diplomacy between, U.S. and President Zelensky, 6 face-to-face meetings between President Trump and President Zelensky. President Zelensky, in fact, says that 90% of, the 20-point plan and, their path towards peace and resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is on track. But at the same time, Putin continues to launch drone attacks on Kyiv while, demanding a total territorial surrender. So what do you think? What is your reading of this 20-point plan? Is it a genuine plan for a sovereign Ukrainian future? What is your reading of it?
So what we're looking at is not a peace deal here, and it's definitely a strategic positioning document. This plan in no way, shape, or form ends the war. It only reshapes it. And essentially what it is, it's a reflection of alignment between the United States and the Ukraine, not consensus with Russia. So what I see happening, to be honest with you, is Ukraine is preparing for endurance, not capitulation. I think you're going to see, once it arrives on Vladimir Putin's desk via the United States, of course, Ukraine has no direct engagement with Russia for obvious reasons, he will have 2 negotiables, which will include the full control of Donetsk and strategic leverage over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. But what I personally see happening here is, it's way too soon for this to be considered a document to end the wars for the reasons I just stated regarding Russia's stance, which is going to probably reject it outright. But more so, you don't really pre-negotiate reconstruction at the scale that is being laid out in this document if you expect the war to end next month. This is a containment and risk management plan to basically work on positioning Ukraine in a way that will, be prepared for what to expect next. I think this is far from over.
Absolutely. Adele, Absolutely. And you know, how different is it from the earlier 20-point peace plan? That remains to be seen. But whether it's going to lead to the end of the war, or at least the beginning of the end of the war, that remains to be seen. But very important point that you made about Ukraine, Adele. And I want to take that point across to Mr. Joshi. Mr. Joshi, is the end of the war now hinging on Ukraine essentially making concessions?
I think yes. I think there's very little doubt that the territorial issue is the main one, which is a stumbling block. As far as the security guarantees are concerned, you know, President Zelensky said that it's 100% done. Though subsequently, President Trump said that it's only 95% done. Whatever it is, the security guarantee is not the issue. The issue is really the territorial one. And the conditions that have been put, I think President Zelensky has made it clear that he would not like to take the responsibility of saying, okay, go ahead. He wants a referendum, or he wants to go through an election. So basically, the issue will be kicked back to the people of Ukraine. Because obviously, since Ukraine is losing territory out here, it's going in for a loss. So obviously, Mr. Zelensky does not want to be the fall guy. So he is insisting on some kind of a referendum that will approve or disapprove of the peace plan.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. But, having said that, earlier in October, it was a 28-point framework, which has, shrunk down to 20-point framework right now as we are ending the year in December 2025. So is it really a diplomatic progress, or, is it stripping away, from Ukraine? What is your reading of that? Let's just ask Indrani Talukdar, who's patiently waiting for her turn.
So much, first and foremost, for inviting me for this wonderful panel discussion. So, I agree with both the panelists in this, that this whole peace plan, this 20-point peace plan, which we have been talking about, it doesn't seem to be successful. It's just, a kind of some kind of a negotiation which US and Ukraine is trying to have it with the Europe. Because if you look at the 20-point plan, which actually it's called as a framework, which is a foundational, agreement according to the Ukrainian president for the peace plan. What I see to it is that Putin will not go for it, because if you see, he has to give up on Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporozhye, which are very crucial for Russia. And Putin very recently, I think few weeks back, he has clearly spoken about that Russia is not going to give up on Donbass. And let me tell you also one more important point about it, and I keep talking about this, is that Donbass is rich with critical earth minerals, apart from the other things. So I don't think so that Putin will be in any, thing where he would want to give up on this territories. So I don't see that somewhere or anywhere in the future, this 20-point plan is going to be successful, according to me.
Right. So you are quite critical of the 20-point peace plan, and of course you're not 100% fully convinced, Indrani. But let me take the point across to Adele. Adele, so essentially the major issue with this 20-point peace plan, or several other engagements that have happened between Russia and Ukraine, is essentially the land issue. And like Indrani was also mentioning, the Zaporizhzhia plant, and then of course Donbass region, all of these Russia is not going to be willing to return to Ukraine. So how do you think peace will be established, or how do we move on from this point onward? And what do you think is going to be the outcome of this engagement that President Donald Trump has held with Zelensky?
Thank you for that. I think ultimately in the long term, there will be no grand peace treaty. I think this is going to turn into, and I think increasingly we're seeing this, a Korea-style standoff in Eastern Europe. It's going to be armed, it's going to be tense, unresolved. The Korean War ended with an armistice, right? But not a peace treaty. And so I think what's going to happen is the same thing. The fighting is going to stop. The borders will be frozen, but the war in Korea, at least, never fully ended. And I think that's what's going to happen here. Basically, Ukraine is moving towards the same outcome. It's going to continue, I think, in this horrible freeze hold. And to be frank with you, if you look at it, the comparisons are quite notable. Korean demilitarization zone is one of the most militarized borders on earth. And that's actually what Zelensky's asking for in 20-point peace plans, to have the 800,000 troops, all that Russia is definitely going to reject. But essentially, you have basically South Korea surviving because of ironclad US security guarantees, if you want to take the comparison. And you have North Korea persisting because of the backing from China and Russia. On Ukraine's side, the plan is to get the EU membership, US bilateral guarantees, and European forces to create that same structure. So you have one protected state on one side, which is South Korea in this case, which would be Ukraine, and then you have a hostile power on the other, which is how they're framing Russia. So essentially, that's how I see it happening. Indrani mentioned that the rare earth minerals are obviously a major play here. I even wrote a piece about this a month or two ago about how the world is shifting. The US specifically is shifting away from the reliance on traditional commodities more into rare earths. I think the whole world is in a race for this. So it's a highly sensitive area. But yeah, I think that if we look at the Korea situation, what we may end up having in Eastern Europe regarding Ukraine and Russia.
Adele, thank you so much for drawing an analogy between the North Korea and South Korea and this situation and the similarities between the two. But my next question to you, in fact, Mr. Joshi, is, in fact, interestingly, Putin was visiting India just like a couple of days ago. So does this 20-point plan, satisfy India's strategic interest in stable Eurasia?
Well, the thing is that, first of all, the plan must work. I think it will, because if the Americans and the Ukrainians say that it's reached 95%, then I would say it will work. But yes, Ukraine will clearly have to give up Donbass. I have no doubt in my mind that the Russians will never accept anything less than that. The fact is that most of Donbass is in any case under Russian control currently. Now, what comes to the question you asked me related to the question of Indian interests, I think Indian interests are served by a stabilization of the situation, stabilization, peace in Europe, with Russia going back to normality, in the sense, instead of being a war economy, we would like to develop our economic ties with Russia. And as it is, a certain opportunity has opened up because of the European embargo. Russian business is increasingly looking southwards, and they have been looking at India as well. So I think there are advantages that are there, and peace will bring them. Peace, I think, generally would be good for everyone, in the sense there are advantages that India has. There are relationships that India can develop with Ukraine. We don't have as deep a relationship with Ukraine as we have with Russia, but still there are areas in which Ukraine can be, relationship with Ukraine can be beneficial, particularly in the defense area. Don't forget that this war has made Ukraine a very innovative kind of a power when it comes to drones, drone technology, etc. Those are things certainly which would be very useful if we could, if there is peace there and we can develop relationships with them.
Absolutely. And Mr. Joshi, what Donald Trump essentially is trying to do with this 20-point peace plan is, of course, incorporate a lot of economics and business into resolving this war, this matter. So, of course, we have a divided house as far as the 20-point peace plan is concerned. But let me come to you, Ms. Talukdar, and let me bring your attention to a very important matter that Zelensky raised. He insisted that a deal must have a ceasefire first, while Donald Trump said that there is no need for a ceasefire. Now, if you cut back to a couple of months back during the Israel-Hamas war, President Trump was using maximum pressure to end the war. So why was the president using maximum pressure to bring about a ceasefire in that war and not in this one?
You see, the ceasefire is actually important, and that was what Trump was trying to do during the Gaza attack. But he has also seen that it has not been working successfully, because no matter how many ceasefire deals were agreed upon, Israel was not, agreeing to it. It kept on violating, and of course, because it was trying to, attack Hamas and annihilate the terrorism aspect of that. But Trump, I think, somewhere has realized that ceasefires do not work out in such case of conflicts. So that's why this time he's not pressurizing on ceasefire. And if we go back a little bit, maybe in the March of 2025, before this rare earth mineral agreement was signed between the US and Ukraine, so that was actually the first discussion between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, where Trump was almost successful in bringing a kind of a ceasefire deal between the conflicting parties. But if you remember that it did not work out, within days' time. Both the parties have blamed each other that Russia was the first one to go ahead and attack Ukraine despite the deal. So somewhere I think US understands that ceasefires, and here let us point towards this, that Russia is a very powerful country, so it will not cater to certain kind of ceasefire, and I think Trump understands it very clearly.
Absolutely. Indrani, my question to you is, while we are speaking about the conversations and, 6 face-to-face meetings between Donald Trump and Zelensky, but Trump insisted that his 1-hour phone call with Putin was very productive. Having said that, Ukraine still insists that, Kremlin still insists that Ukraine must withdraw from, Donbas. So is Putin actually negotiating according to you, just help us understand the situation over here, or simply waiting for that 60-day ceasefire just to rearm, probably his exhausted forces?
Recently in 19 December, if you go back, Putin had given a almost 5-hour long press conference. And if you go through his press conference, majority of it was on Ukraine and the Ukraine war. And there he has clearly spoken about what were the Russia's demands. And one of the Russian demands were it is like if you cull out from that whole press conference, what the main point comes out, that Russia is nowhere willing to compromise. So I think even now, right now, if you see that, and you are somewhere correct, that if some kind of a ceasefire deal happens of the 60 days, so Putin will try to, again, rearm his exhausted soldiers. And, if you see, no matter how much the discussions and negotiations are going on, with the conflicting parties, with the respective, countries like US and all, the attacks are still going on. So if Russia is saying something or Ukraine is saying something, but the attacks on each other is continuously going on. So again, I don't think so Russia is in any mood to compromise. And and also at the same time, Ukraine also would not want to compromise. And if I may point out one one point has come out on this 20-point deal that Russia somewhere has said that, it is in fact, on the 28-point deal that Russia will allow Ukraine to use the Dnieper River and also the Black Sea for commercial purposes. So this is very interesting because till 2017, the Ukraine was actually, having this whole. It was actually having that, right to leash that kind of, what do you say? The agreement was that where Russia will be able to go through and use that Black Sea, Sea of Azov and all through Ukraine. But now the tables have turned, and somewhere in that 28-point deal, which was supposedly tilting towards Russia, there it was like where Putin was actually very happy to let Ukraine use, Black Sea and also the Dnieper River. So tables in a way have turned. So let's see. Let's wait and see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Indrani, you've made very pertinent points, and let me go across to Adele now. Adele, let me also talk to you about security guarantees, because this is something that has come up earlier as well. Whenever these kind of conversations have happened between both the sides, Europe has particularly stated that security guarantees is something that they are looking at getting ensured, and President Zelensky is also reported to have said that security guarantees should come in the form of US guaranteeing Ukraine's security for 15 years. What do you think the United States is essentially trying to do here when it comes to guaranteeing security for Ukraine for 15 years? Is there another deal, economic deal that you're seeing here? And will this suggestion by the United States ensure in giving security guarantees to the whole of Europe?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. There's absolutely an economic deal to be made here. At the end of the day, it all comes down to business incentives. And it's about resources, it's about access vis-a-vis Ukraine and Eastern Europe to the surrounding regions and other parts of the world that the United States will need. And frankly, any nation in the same position would be doing this as well. And I think it's a responsible thing to do, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, the multipolar world that we're living in, I think the majority of people would rather America be a strong force, no matter where in the world they are, as opposed to the alternatives. But I will say this, security is never truly a guarantee. You can have America, I'll say this, I'll backtrack that. Security is a guarantee in the sense that once America enters a conflict, they are there for the long run. And if they're guaranteeing 15 years, if we're promising that, we're going to keep our promises. What it does is it kind of deters a likelihood of Russia, becoming even more aggressive. It deters it a bit, but it doesn't prevent that from happening. Peace, at the end of the day, it's not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of responsibility. And I think that's what America understands and exudes, the sense and the essence of responsibility and a duty to at least commit to pushing for democracy and human rights and preventing conflict as much as it can. But the duty of leadership really is not to promise perfect outcomes, and America never promises perfect outcomes. But the whole point here is to prevent catastrophic ones. And I really think that both Ukraine and Russia, especially Ukraine, I have to say, has experienced enough of a catastrophe in this situation where at the end of the day, while I don't see Putin and Russia, kind of coming together and caving to a deal, I do see that if it's not going to turn into a protracted North Korea, South Korea type deal here, it is going to ultimately rest in Ukraine's hands to decide to be the capitulator, if you want to call it that, and to be the person to fold in order to put a true end to this war. But frankly, if both sides continue the way they're going, I don't see it really going anywhere. But as long as America's involved, there can be a guarantee that the catastrophe can at least be lessened, because there will be troops on the ground. And that will be a major deterrent, as it has been in other parts of the world.
That's right. And definitely that is something that we will be closely tracking, that peace plan that has been presented by Donald Trump to Zelensky. And of course, Indrani, you make a very, very valid point that there is definitely business involved in all that United States is essentially proposing. So whether the 20-point peace plan is going to lead to peace is something that we will have to watch out for. Will Ukraine agree to making those territorial concessions that Russia has been asking for? That also will be interesting to watch out for. But for the moment, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now.